A quiet suburb in Mexico City is shattered by an affair that spirals into a bloody crime. The story revolves around Elena Reyes, a young wife married to Carlos Reyes, and the dark secret she holds with his father, Vincent. This is a tale of forbidden passion, betrayal, and revenge that unravels in the wake of a brutal murder. In Mexico City, 2012, Elena Reyes finds herself alone more often than she ever expected when she married Carlos. She's a woman of warmth and vibrancy, standing out in the conservative social circles of the city, where traditions often trump modernity. At 28, Elena feels a stifling sense of confinement in her marriage to Carlos, who is 12 years her senior. Carlos had swept her off her feet just a few years before, with promises of a life filled with excitement, stability, and his affection. But the reality, shaped by his relentless business travel, is starkly different. Carlos, a businessman in the construction industry, is often gone for weeks, working on deals and traveling across the country. At first, Elena busied herself with the opulent life Carlos's wealth afforded her. She attended charity events, met friends for coffee, and spent afternoons browsing high-end boutiques. But soon, even the glittering lifestyle began to lose its shine. She was restless, yearning for something beyond the gilded cage she found herself in. Friends and family noticed her loneliness, whispering about her husband's priorities, and wondering aloud if Carlos was aware of her unhappiness. During this time, Carlos's father, Vincent Reyes, re-entered Elena's life. Vincent, a wealthy man in his late 50s, had been a towering figure in Carlos's childhood and adulthood alike, known for his success and power in business and social circles. Vincent's personality was magnetic yet domineering, and his gaze often lingered on Elena a moment longer than was customary. When Carlos was absent, Vincent became omnipresent, visiting the house under the pretense of checking in on her, offering his companionship to ease her isolation. Vincent's visits began innocently, with late morning teas or small, shared dinners at the family estate when Carlos was away. He seemed attentive, asking about her days, listening to her frustrations, and subtly flattering her in ways that rekindled the spark in her eyes. By late summer, Vincent's attraction to Elena had evolved from mild fascination to intense interest. His words to her, though indirect, hinted at his feelings, and were crafted to appeal to her loneliness. To Elena, the attention felt refreshing and validating, a stark contrast to the sense of neglect she endured in her marriage. She had never felt so seen, so understood. By October 2012, their interaction shifted from fleeting moments of warmth to something much deeper. Vincent suggested they meet outside the estate, at a small hotel, on the city's outskirts. She hesitated but couldn't ignore the pull. The secretive nature of these encounters added a thrill, something she'd never experienced in her married life with Carlos. They continued meeting this way, in hidden places and quiet, secluded parts of town where they knew no one would recognize them. Each encounter strengthened their bond, but what Elena didn't realize was the extent of Vincent's hold over her. Months passed, and Vincent's influence over Elena grew more manipulative. He became possessive, drawing her in with a mixture of charm and control. He would remind her of her loneliness, subtly suggesting that Carlos would always put his work above her. Vincent's words began planting seeds of doubt, making Elena question the foundation of her marriage and, eventually, her own worth. She became trapped in a cycle of longing and guilt, unable to end the affair, yet increasingly uncomfortable with Vincent's growing dominance. Vincent's own motives were far from pure. In his eyes, Elena was a vibrant escape from his own life, which, despite its wealth and influence, felt hollow and unsatisfying. Though his power over people had always thrilled him, with Elena, it was different. She represented a conquest he could not resist, a beautiful extension of his own desires. The more she relied on him emotionally, the more Vincent controlled the terms of their encounters, choosing the times and places to meet, often in places that would remind her of her dependence on him. By early 2013, Elena's once vibrant personality had dulled, overshadowed by Vincent's influence. Her friends noticed the change, watching her withdraw from her usual circles and adopt a quieter, more reserved demeanor. She kept to herself, avoiding gatherings where her marriage or Vincent might come up. She was weighed down by the dual nature of her relationship with Vincent. On the one hand, he fulfilled her need for connection, and on the other, he bound her to a secrecy and guilt that ate away at her. As the months wore on, Vincent's visits became more frequent, and his hold on Elena only deepened. He was no longer just a companion, but a force that steered her life. She had lost control, unable to make a single decision without considering his reaction. While Carlos was away on another extended business trip, Vincent's possessiveness grew darker, and their encounters became tinged with an underlying tension. Elena felt trapped, but found herself unable to break free from the only relationship that seemed to fill the void in her life. This twisted bond would soon reach a breaking point, and the shadow of betrayal would give way to a tragedy that no one, not even Elena, saw coming. On the morning of March 6th, 2010, police are called to the Reyes estate after a maid discovers Vincent's body in his study, slumped over his desk with multiple stab wounds. The scene is gruesome, and there are signs of a struggle. Forensic analysis reveals the use of a small, sharp blade, possibly a kitchen knife. Bloodstains indicate that Vincent fought back, and his death was neither quick nor peaceful. On the morning of March 8th, 2010, the Reyes estate was tense and filled with whispers as detectives began their inquiry into the murder of Vincent Reyes. The family and household staff were visibly shaken, exchanging worried glances as they awaited their turn to speak with the authorities. As the investigation began, it was clear the detectives were searching for something deeper, something hidden in the delicate cracks of this wealthy family's facade. Carlos, the grieving son and heir to the Reyes fortune, was the first to be questioned. He had been out of town on business, confirmed by receipts and numerous phone calls to associates in another city. His calm composure held as he recounted his relationship with his father and spoke in somber tones about Vincent's influence and legacy. But beneath Carlos's poised demeanor, there was a flicker of tension, a discomfort with being scrutinized at such a vulnerable time. With no evidence linking him to the crime, detectives moved swiftly to other potential suspects. The questioning then turned to Elena, the young and beautiful wife of Carlos. Elena had become an enigma to the investigators, someone who didn't fit cleanly into any traditional role within the family. At first glance, she seemed to be the grieving daughter-in-law, but her demeanor betrayed her. Her nervous gestures and uneasy glances spoke of more than just grief. She was struggling with something hidden, an anxiety that detectives couldn't ignore. Elena claimed to have spent the night of the murder with her sister, a story that might have been accepted under less critical circumstances. Yet, as the detectives delved deeper into her alibi, it became clear that the details didn't add up. Phone records revealed a disturbing truth. Elena's phone had remained in the vicinity of the Reyes estate on the night of the murder. This revelation cast doubt on her story and made Elena the center of their investigation. As suspicion grew around her, Elena's mind was a storm of conflicting emotions. Her once thriving life had, over recent months, turned into an endless cycle of secrets and lies. The source of her torment lay with Vincent, her father-in-law, with whom she had fallen into a complicated, illicit affair. What had started as a distraction from her loneliness had devolved into something dark and unmanageable. Their bond, initially one of mutual fascination, had taken a twisted turn, becoming a psychological trap from which Elena could see no escape. By March the 10th, detectives uncovered the critical piece of evidence that would shape the entire case. A series of text messages between Elena and Vincent. The messages painted a picture of a volatile relationship filled with arguments, emotional confrontations, and Vincent's increasing manipulation. Detectives learned that on the night of his death, Vincent had called Elena to his private office under the pretense of needing to speak urgently. Their conversation, pieced together from fragments of texts, indicated a pivotal shift. Vincent had finally decided to end the relationship, possibly fearing that it would one day be discovered. For the first time, he was pulling away, leaving Elena with the sudden and harsh reality that the one person she had relied on, however toxic, was abandoning her. As detectives studied the texts, they uncovered a chilling dynamic between the two. Vincent had used his power over Elena in ways that went far beyond an affair. When Elena had once suggested ending the relationship, Vincent threatened to tell Carlos everything. In moments of weakness, he had hinted at exposing her if she dared to defy him, leaving her feeling trapped in a web of guilt and fear. The weight of his control bore down on her, pushing her to comply, even as it tore at her sanity. The more time Elena spent in this toxic relationship, the more she realized how thoroughly Vincent held her life in his hands. Her every action, her every thought was clouded by his presence. With Vincent's sudden decision to end things, she was faced with a terrifying void. It was a shock to her system. The man who had once been a source of companionship, however destructive, had cut her off without warning. Elena's desperation grew, and the isolation she had felt in her marriage now deepened to unbearable levels. She had been abandoned by the one person who truly knew her, however much that connection had cost her. The detectives now saw Elena in a new light. Her nervous gestures were not just grief or guilt, but signs of a woman cornered, torn between her attachment to a powerful man and the despair his betrayal had brought. She was a woman drowning in her own silence, suffocated by secrets and manipulation, pushed to the edge by a relationship that had consumed her. As detectives pieced together the last interactions between Elena and Vincent, they saw a psychological breaking point beginning to emerge. Elena was caught in a storm of conflicting emotions, rage, sorrow, and fear that swirled together in the hours leading up to Vincent's death. They wondered if, in the depths of her despair, she had been pushed too far, forced to a place where her only escape was to silence the man who had held her life captive. This affair, hidden beneath layers of deceit and shame, had unraveled with a terrible finality. And in the aftermath, the investigators could only ask themselves, how far would someone go when left with no way out? On March 12, 2010, the arrest of Elena Reyes sent fear and panic through her community, stunning both those who knew her and those who only knew of her. The morning of her arrest was clouded by whispers and hushed conversations among neighbors, friends, and strangers who gathered around the Reyes estate, eager for details on the scandal unfolding behind the mansion's walls. Elena was taken into custody after police confirmed her fingerprints on the knife used to kill Vincent. The mounting evidence, combined with her troubled relationship with her father-in-law, was enough to paint a clear but disturbing picture in the eyes of the public. News spread fast, and in a matter of hours, people around the country were talking about Elena Reyes and the man she had allegedly murdered. As she sat in custody, Elena seemed distant, almost detached from the events around her. She barely spoke during questioning, offering only cryptic statements about Vincent's control over her, her eyes often cast down, as if replaying memories in her mind that only she could see. Investigators described her as almost ghost-like, a woman weighed down by secrets and guilt. She was neither confessing to the crime nor attempting to explain her innocence. Instead, she was locked in a silence that only added to the public's fascination. Elena's lawyers were quick to step in, bringing forth a defense strategy that shifted the spotlight onto Vincent's psychological grip over her. They spoke of a pattern of manipulation, of a woman driven to her breaking point by a man who had used his influence to hold her captive in their affair. They argued that this wasn't just a case of a wife who had betrayed her husband with his father. It was a story of a woman trapped by emotional manipulation so powerful that it ultimately fractured her mental state. By March 20th, the courtroom had become the center of nationwide attention. People crowded the courthouse daily, hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman whose story had captivated them. Inside, the air was thick with tension, every seat filled with spectators, reporters, and curious onlookers. Cameras flashed outside the doors as people debated in whispers whether Elena was a victim, a criminal, or both. The media seized on every new development, turning the courtroom drama into a near obsession, each headline detailing the emotional complexities that had led up to the crime. The prosecution took an aggressive stance. They depicted Elena as a calculating woman who had used her relationship with Vincent for her own gain until it no longer served her purposes. They argued that her motive was cold and selfish, that she had killed Vincent to free herself from the affair, while protecting her marriage to Carlos. Their portrayal of Elena as someone who could plot a crime with such ruthlessness was compelling, striking fear into the hearts of those who had once seen her as nothing more than a beautiful, tragic figure. However, the defense countered with a different story, a narrative of deep psychological abuse that revealed the layers of control Vincent had exerted over Elena. They presented her not as a scheming murderer, but as a desperate woman who had lost her sense of self under Vincent's influence. They described the ways he had manipulated her, from subtle gestures to overt threats, creating a web of control that Elena could neither see nor escape until it was too late. Their argument was simple, yet powerful. Elena had been a victim too, a woman suffering from a temporary break in her sanity, due to the psychological torment Vincent had inflicted. As the trial unfolded, the emotional stakes intensified, and soon Carlos was called to the stand. In a moment that would be discussed for years, he faced the court, torn between loyalty to his father and the betrayal he felt from his wife. The tension in the room was palpable as he sat down, his face strained with the weight of what he was about to share. Carlos had lost his father, and yet he was also facing the reality that his wife, the woman he had trusted, was implicated in the murder. His testimony was filled with raw emotion, as he struggled to process the conflicting feelings of anger, sorrow, and betrayal that overwhelmed him. Carlos spoke about his father, sharing memories that painted Vincent as a strong, sometimes intimidating presence, but also as a man he had loved deeply. He described his father's charisma, his influence, and the control he seemed to have over every part of his life, even extending to Elena. But when he mentioned his wife, his voice changed, softening with a note of regret. He admitted to seeing signs of her unhappiness, signs he had ignored in his pursuit of professional success. This acknowledgement of his own guilt in her loneliness drew a ripple of reaction from the audience, some seeing it as a tragic irony that Carlos had, in a way, pushed her toward his father. Elena's sister, too, was called to testify. She revealed a side of Elena that few knew, painting a picture of a woman who had once been full of life and optimism, but who had gradually become distant, reserved, and fearful. Her sister shared how Elena had confided in her months earlier, hinting at troubles with Vincent, but never going into details, too afraid of what might happen if she did. Her sister's testimony painted a vivid picture of Elena's inner struggle, her constant fear, and her desperation to escape an affair that had spiraled far beyond her control. In those tense courtroom moments, the public saw a family torn apart, each member carrying a different piece of the story. Carlos, who had to reconcile his love and loyalty with a bitter truth. Elena's sister, who knew just enough to feel the ache of helplessness for not having done more. And Elena herself, sitting with a silence that both angered and mystified everyone in attendance. Each day, the trial peeled back more layers of a tragic affair, woven with manipulation, secrets, and betrayal. For everyone watching, it became clear that this was not simply a case of murder, but a story of fractured lives, a family destroyed by desires, ambitions, and power plays. As testimonies continued, the line between victim and perpetrator grew blurred, leaving everyone to wonder just who, if anyone, was truly innocent in this tragic saga. After weeks of heart-wrenching testimonies, emotional outbursts, and agonizing deliberations, the trial reached its dramatic conclusion. The judge delivered a verdict that felt heavy, not just for Elena Reyes, but for everyone who had been following the case. The courtroom sat in a stunned silence as Elena was found guilty of manslaughter, a decision that acknowledged her claim of psychological abuse, but still held her accountable for the crime. The sentence, 20 years, seemed to echo in the courtroom, a solemn testament to a life unraveled by manipulation, control, and a desperate attempt to break free from a twisted relationship. As the gavel fell, the weight of it all settled on Elena's shoulders. She was no longer just a woman tangled in an illicit affair, but a symbol, a tragic figure caught between love and captivity. In the days that followed, her face, once vibrant and hopeful, became etched with the somber resignation of someone who had lost everything. She was escorted from the courtroom in silence, a shadow of the woman she once had been, as cameras captured every step, every moment of her fall from grace. Her story became a cautionary tale, sparking conversations and debates across the country. People spoke of her not only as a woman who had committed a crime, but as a tragic example of the extremes to which people can be pushed when power is abused. Meanwhile, the impact of the verdict left Carlos Reyes emotionally shattered. He had already lost his father, but this trial had forced him to confront a reality that was almost too painful to bear. His wife, the woman he had once loved deeply, had been complicit in a betrayal that had not only ended his father's life, but had also destroyed his own. For Carlos, every detail that had emerged during the trial felt like a wound, fresh and deep, that would never fully heal. In the days following the trial, Carlos made a decision to leave Mexico, unable to face the memories or the whispers that lingered in his family's once proud estate. The life he had built in Mexico City, the family he had tried to honor, now felt like a burden he could no longer carry. His departure was quiet, marked only by a few close friends and family members who gathered to say goodbye. He left with a promise to himself that he would never again speak of the case, choosing to bury the tragedy with his departure. The life he had envisioned for himself was gone, replaced by a future that was fractured and uncertain. The Reyes family estate, a grand symbol of the family's wealth and power, stood eerily empty in the aftermath. Once bustling with life, it became a haunting reminder of all that had been lost. The halls, which had once echoed with laughter and conversations, were now silent, a hollow reflection of the family's shattered legacy. Staff members, once loyal and proud to serve the Reyes family, left one by one, unable to bear the weight of working in a place tainted by such darkness. The opulent decor and finely crafted furniture stood untouched, collecting dust, as if waiting for a time that would never return. For the community, the empty estate became something of a ghost story, a place filled with memories of betrayal, loss, and the tragic consequences of unchecked power. Locals whispered of the events that had unfolded within its walls, sharing versions of the story that grew with each telling. It became a landmark not of the Reyes family's prestige, but of a scandal that had forever tarnished their name. Children dared each other to get close to the mansion, while adults looked at it with quiet sadness, remembering the way things had once been. In the years that followed, Elena's story was retold countless times in articles, television specials, and whispers among neighbors. Her face became the tragic emblem of the consequences of power and manipulation, of a life twisted by control and desperate choices. The love affair that had once held her captive would forever be remembered, not as a romance, but as a tale of darkness and desperation, a tragic spiral that left everyone involved forever changed. Don't forget to like and subscribe and check out this other strange case, where a father-in-law's affair with son's young wife ends in pregnancy and suicide. See you in the next video.